Hey YouTube, how are you guys doing? Well, in this video, I have a really exciting upgrade for the office, and the hint for what it is a white Apple power brick. Now, if you guys already know where this is going, then you know it's pretty cool. If you guys don't, then stick around and wait. So, my main monitors, again, another hint, I mainly just use one, but I do have a second one off to the side. And the main one I have here is this Dell. It's a 4x3 monitor, but I have it set in a 16x10 window, I believe. And for the amount of screen that it's using in this mode, it's actually pretty useful. But everything's going to change because now I'm upgrading to a bigger monitor, and I plan to use this one, which is still really handy because it has a speaker that I added later on, and it also has USB ports on the side along with VGA and DVI inputs. And this is going to be a really nice secondary monitor, and I do technically have a secondary monitor over here. Excuse the cables, but this is another Dell, and it's mainly just for one of the PCs, since this only has one VGA port, but since the new one is going to be in the place of this one, then this one can be used for other older machines or something that doesn't have a monitor. But now this is going to be a secondary monitor, and I'm probably going to leave it in the native 4x3 resolution once I switch over. But in order to do this, I had to wait for a package. Let's move the camera down, and let's actually unbox this. So this is technically kind of an unboxing video, but not really, since it's not all that exciting, but it is very useful. Okay, so again, another hint, and it looks like the box has a little bit of damage, but as long as the cable is in good condition, that's the number one priority. The Mac Mini does have HDMI, but it does not have native DVI, which is why this adapter is needed. I'll open this up and I will show you guys what this is actually going to be used for. Okay, so I got the package open, and there is the cable. Now, unlike some of the older adapters, they don't come with the little plastic covers, but as long as the cable works, that's the most important part. And of course, we get our fancy, handy documentation, how to connect a DVI cable to HDMI, in case you didn't know that. And it's pretty funny with these older adapters how they don't usually change the copyright dates. So this one is from 2014, which coincidentally is also the same time that the camera I'm using was made, which is a 6 Plus. I decided to change things up again to make stuff interesting, and so far I would say that the camera is actually pretty decent. It's definitely a little bit better than the 5. It's not as good as the 6S and newer, but for the last 8 megapixel camera, it's pretty good. Anyways, now we just have to get the adapter out, and I will show you guys the monitor that is going to be used. Okay, so sorry for the bad lighting, but I just wanted to show you guys the back of the Mac Mini, and here the output is going from the Thunderbolt port to a VGA adapter, and on the right side of the port there is an HDMI output, and thankfully I'll be able to use this adapter still with the secondary monitor now, and I'll be using the HDMI output for the main monitor. I'll be able to do a dual monitor setup without having to do any extra things. All I have to do is basically move the secondary monitor, since it's still going to be plugged in, and I'll just put the main monitor in its place. So now, let's actually go do that. Okay, so I shut down the Mac Mini, and now we can actually take a look at this beast of a monitor. Now this isn't even the biggest one they made. This is the second tier, and the camera's probably just going to have a black screen now because of the size of this monitor. And if we take the camera back, we can actually see what it is. If you haven't already guessed, this is a Cinema HD display from 2004. Okay, so I went back to handheld mode, and as you can see, this monitor pretty much overtakes the Dell. And granted, this is a 4x3 monitor, and this is a widescreen monitor, and it's just pretty funny to think that this Dell monitor is newer than the Cinema display, and this design originates from 2004, and they're still using the same type of foot for the newest iMacs, which is just pretty funny. Anyways, this is the end part of the monitor, and this is why we need DVI specifically, because this is one of the first Apple monitors, or this is the first Apple monitor to have native DVI, and of course that's as it falls. And this uses the USB-C rip-off power connector along with the very nice, very useful FireWire 400 and just standard USB 2. This is the superior port, but of course we also do have USB, and this is what plugs into the power brick. And again, it does look a lot like USB-C, but this is a bit bigger dimensionally, but it looks very similar. And you can also plug it in both ways. There is no orientation where it matters, which is also really nice. And now we actually have to set up this monitor, which is pretty crazy since there are a lot of things plugged into this. But thankfully, Apple being Apple, they made this 4-connector setup to use just one big cable sticking out from the back of the monitor, which is really nice. And the best part about this monitor, the most surprising part about this Cinema display was a free find. Now, the adapter itself actually had to be purchased, but this monitor itself was going to be tossed out. And thankfully, I got it before that happened, and this is just an amazing upgrade from the Dell. And while this monitor has served me a lot of usage with many different computers, I still want to use it as a secondary monitor. So for a free Cinema monitor, I would say this is a really nice looking setup now. It's made a lot more room along the bottom, and now I can actually put the keyboard and mouse that I usually use without having to put it somewhere else due to space. The monitor is of course easily adjustable. Of course, one-handed it is a little bit difficult, but I've also got the Dell monitor over here, and pretty much all the inputs have stayed the same since it's still hooked up to my PC, and I've got the speakers and all the USB ports hooked up. I usually used this more with the Mac though, so I still have the USB ports plugged on this, but with this monitor it'll also give me 2 additional USB ports, and I would use FireWire, but the FireWire port on the Mac Mini is FireWire 800, so I would need another adapter. But if I want to use them, then I can just use one of these bricks, not the USB one, the FireWire one, and then I can use it for charging, which is still pretty functional since I have some older devices that do well on FireWire. Even though this is a bit of an older display, this is still a much nicer looking display. The Dell monitor is really nice, but again, this is a 4x3 monitor, and trying to do video editing or using some newer programs can get a little bit annoying due to the lack of real estate on the screen, but this is just a really nice upgrade, and now I guess we'll just have to plug it in. And of course, with the connectors, I'll plug in the adapter and we'll have to check it out. Okay, so everything's plugged in, and now I guess we'll just have to try it out. So let's power on the Mac Mini, and we've got a light right there, It is booting up on the Dell, which doesn't really surprise me because we'll have to configure what this monitor is going to be. I think it's going to act as a secondary for now, but we'll set that up and we'll make it as the main monitor. Yeah, this is exciting. I've never had a big monitor like this, let alone an official Apple monitor, and so this is just really fun to have, and I can't wait to actually use this thing. So this is just insane. Wow. Look at that. Okay, so I just wanted to mention before we switch this over to being the main monitor, first of all, cosmetically, this display is in very nice condition, except for this one small little one here, which is barely noticeable. It's only really noticeable due to the lighting. Otherwise, this display is in really nice condition. The only small issue with it is that if you have a lighter image or something that is not as dark as the dark mode or the background you have, such as the day version of Mojave, if you look at the edges here, there is some small yellowing. I've seen similar displays do stuff like this, such as the PowerBook. But with dark mode being on, this actually really helps out the monitor, because once you switch over to the night version, you can barely even notice it. If anything, it matches the background. And of course, when you move the window over, you can barely see it at all. Down here, there isn't as much yellowing. It's pretty much just on the sides and the top. You can't even see it due to the darker colors usually being used, and on this side it's pretty much non-existent. So the only real damage to this display is really in this corner up here, but for a free cinema display, I'm not complaining at all. It's just one small little thing I wanted to note. Of course, it being free, it's not exactly perfect, but otherwise this is an amazing monitor. And of course, the Dell monitor is still a really nice display, but this is a really nice upgrade. Okay, so this is a really cool setup right now. So I've made the cinema display the main monitor now. If you haven't seen the last video, I actually go in depth with these files and trying to recover and such. I'll leave a card in the video and you guys can check that out. But this is now the main monitor, the Dell is the secondary monitor, and there are a lot of pretty cool features for a display of this age, and it's surprising how it's still pretty much fully compatible, even though it's still showing the Tiger. I believe this is Tiger. I just double checked, this is Tiger. I don't have a lot of experience with the really old versions of macOS 10. Of course, this was released originally in 2004, which is why it shows that wallpaper, which is still a really nice wallpaper even today. Let's actually look at the features of this monitor. So with the display, of course, there's standard stuff like brightness, display resolution, if you can mirror, and for the arrangement, this is pretty standard if you have more than one monitor. You can make it whichever monitor you want to be the main one, or the orientation of it, which is pretty nice. Of course, you can mirror the displays. Color profile, or the display profile for the monitor, which is pretty standard to make sure it displays correctly. Now the options is the pretty interesting part. So on the side of the monitor, there are 3 touch-sensitive buttons. The power button and the 2 brightness control buttons. Brightness is pretty much self-explanatory. There's only one option, and by default it's disabled, which I don't know why. You can, of course, adjust the brightness just like on the keyboard, and of course it's locked. So let's actually make this unlocked. Okay, so unlocking that, and yeah, there it is. Now, I don't know why it's disabled by default, but it also does not display this whenever you touch the buttons, but it does affect the brightness of the display. And if we take a look at this, yeah, I made it darker, and now it's brighter. And the power button actually has some pretty cool features. Only 2 options in this case, but they're still pretty cool. The first one will just turn off the display, which is pretty much standard for a power button. I mean, that's what it does. But the second one, it also puts the computer, the Mac Mini in this case, to sleep And that is actually pretty handy, since sometimes if I have to stop using the Mac Mini and then I want to come back later, but without shutting it off, I can just press that power button and it'll put the Mac Mini to sleep without having to go to the Apple menu and then pressing sleep. I mean, it's not that inconvenient, but might as well use this feature since I can use it. And of course, night shift, it can do with the Dell monitors, so it's not surprising that it can do it with the HD display. And of course, even though this is an older display, it's not LED, it can do cooler temperatures, which is pretty nice. But of course, since night shift is on, it is a little bit more yellow. And that's pretty much it for the features, and that's pretty much it for the display. This monitor is going to be extremely handy since now I have all this space both on the screen, the second display, and physical space on the desk here. And this will give me a lot more room whenever doing stuff with Final Cut, and it'll just be a lot easier since I can also have extra stuff from Final Cut and whatnot on the second display, while having all of this space on the first display without having to switch to a different desktop with the mouse or having to use the app switcher to switch to different apps all the time due to the lack of screen space that the Dell had initially. I had a lot of fun setting this up. I had a lot of fun making the Dell the second monitor and then putting this amazing new to me cinema display as the main monitor. And if you guys like this type of content, then show some support to the channel. I have a Discord and a subreddit, and if you guys have any suggestions or comments, then you can of course leave a comment, but I also have an email where you guys can reply to at the originalcollector1@gmail.com. It's also linked in the description, and all those links are also in the main channel page or in the about page. That's pretty much it for this video. So if you guys enjoy this type of content, then be sure to stick around, as I plan to post at least a bit more frequently now, since of course I have this amazing new display to use. And of course, thanks for watching.